I am Tamar Ishalom, and this is Jewish Crossroads. Julie Platt is one of the most influential community leaders in America today, playing a pivotal role in shaping the Jewish philanthropic landscape. As chair of the Jewish Federations of North America, she has been at the forefront of rallying support for Jewish communities and Israel during critical times. Recently, Platt was honored with a presidential medal by Israel's President Yitzhak Herzog. Her leadership is celebrated not just for the results she achieves, but for the heart and dedication she brings to every endeavor. The Jewish Federations of North America have raised more than $860 million for emergency relief efforts in Israel following the events of October 7th. It's a true privilege to have her with us today. Shalom, Julie, and welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Thank you, Tamar.
This past year has transformed many of us in profound ways. I mean, sometimes challenging our assumptions or changing how we see and experience the world. When you reflect on Julie before October 7th and Julie today, do you notice any shifts or changes in yourself?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure I've gone through a transformation. This is me. It's me before October 7th, and it's me after October 7th. Perhaps I've just expressed my passion and love for the state of Israel and the Jewish people with more energy than I've ever used in my life. I have lived a life of dedication to Israel and to the North American Jewish community and to Jews around the world from a young age until now, but I've never quite been called upon to show up 24/7 or perhaps 24/6 for the Jewish people. And I wouldn't say it's an honor because I wish I didn't need to and it had never happened, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to put my love of my community and of Israel into action. I think the anxiety that I've experienced most significantly around the days of October 7th and the few days after, the inability to sleep or to think of anything else, just reminded me of the depth of my connection to the Israeli people. But it's not new for me. This is exactly how I was raised and who I am.
Yeah, you grew up in Kansas as the only Jewish child in your school, right? How do you remember that experience? And were there any anti-Semitic moments that left a lasting impression on you during childhood?
You're right. I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, a small but mighty Jewish community. I was the only Jew in my graduating senior class. There were a few others, but I was in a class of almost 700 and the only one. But I had a rich Jewish life around the dinner table and following the example of my parents, Zichronah Livracha, who did everything to make us see and know and feel a Jewish life. We had a kosher home, kosher meat shipped in from points east to make sure that we had what we needed to live a kosher life and live a Jewish life. My strongest memory, and there are not many, of experiencing anti-Semitism was a sixth grade teacher I had who, upon learning I was Jewish, told me that she would not cast her pearls before swine, and I was the swine she was referring to. That was the most impactful moment for me of anti-Semitism. But to the opposite, I had the honor of speaking at the rally that we had in Washington just after October 7th of 2023 in early November. And quite soon after that, I received 3 handwritten letters from members of that senior class, all obviously non-Jewish, who wanted me to know and found me through the website of Jewish Federations of North America that they stood for me and stood with me as Christians in their support of Israel. And that has replaced that very bad memory as a beautiful memory of my childhood in Wichita.
That's a beautiful full circle moment. Clearly, anti-Semitism in the U.S. didn't begin on October 7th. We've seen several years of rising incidents, but after October 7th, it feels as though barriers completely broke down, leading to a tidal wave of hostility. Looking back with over a year's perspective, how do you analyze this surge and what surprised you the most about it?
You're right, it's not new. So perhaps I don't find it quite as frightening as others do. I just find it deeply concerning that it's been unleashed. We've been hated for generations. So there's nothing particularly unique or creative about it. I'm disturbed by what we saw on college campuses. I'm disturbed at the incidents where we see violence. I don't believe it is fully simply anti-Semitism. I do agree that we're seeing the beginning of anti-Western actions and activities across this world. Also not new. I think social media, though people say this all the time, it's because it's true, allows for an exponential communication of anti-Semitism that I don't think is more people than it was before. It's just louder, so much louder because it's broadcasted on TikTok and on Instagram and everywhere else. And it feels deafening. I don't believe, and every survey and piece of information has told us that there is not some enormous change in the number of people expressing anti-Semitism, but the volume and the screaming in our ears, I find very disturbing.
Yeah, and they found one another. If once they were ashamed of it, today, they find their group.
Emboldened, deeply emboldened.
And the surge in the volume of anti Semitism has led many to search for connection or reconnection.
I think people remembered who they were. We see that in all kinds of data about what we call the surge, a little bit of a different surge than what you're referring to, which is that people are flocking to be in the community and wanting to be with other Jews and wanting to re-engage and wanting to send their kids to day school and Hebrew school and synagogue membership and young leadership programs and everything else, needing to be in community and wanting to support the community.
Many of them are young Jews who have never participated in such events before. How do you nurture and sustain their engagement over time?
So that is the enormous responsibility of the federation system. We're poised to be able to do that. We are in 146 communities across North America. It's on us. It's on us to make people feel welcome in spaces they haven't been in before, to not feel like they don't have a space and a place with us just because we're more familiar than they are, and to make sure that we make room, that we make sure that we are addressing this surge. And that is on the top of the to-do list of every teen program, synagogue program, Hillel, and Federation across North America. We can't fail at it, and I don't think we will.
Are there like new direction you're thinking about?
I don't think new directions. I think an understanding of what it takes to be inclusive and to foster belonging. And really, I worry about the person who's seeking a synagogue membership for the first time and walks into a shul and everybody knows each other. And so they don't feel welcome. You have to foster a sense of belonging and a sense of welcome. I think we have to expand our offerings so that nothing is sold out or full. So you have the opportunity to join. If you even slightly raise your hand, it can't be ever met with, I'm sorry, no room. We have a task to do. We really do. But you see it, the hundreds of kids coming to a Hillel Shabbat dinner. So we have to make sure that there's enough money to fund the kids who want to come for Shabbat dinner. Or I know there was quite recently a BBYO conference with thousands of young teens. You got to make sure that the ballroom has enough room and that you don't say, sorry, we don't have enough room for you. That's on us. And we have work to do to make sure no one is turned away.
Let's turn to what's been happening on university campuses, the anti-Israel and, in many cases, anti-Semitic protests. When you saw and heard the chants and signs during these protests on so many campuses that are supposed to foster critical, complex, and independent thinking rather than shallow slogans, what was your emotional reaction? How did it hit you deep down?
So I'll say a few things, Tamar. It's no secret that I'm the vice chair of the board of the University of Pennsylvania and have been deeply engaged in its response. So the first thing I will say is how incredibly disappointing it was to me I'm very aware of the fact that, and I'll speak very specifically to Penn, that the majority of people involved in these protests, or certainly more than half, are not even Penn students. They are a well-funded organization, and we are way behind. So I'm disappointed and frustrated that something that was long ago being organized and seeded, that just exploded after October 7th, that we weren't ahead of the game. We were behind. Second thing I'll say is university presidents were caught completely off guard. What do they know from encampments, except maybe there was one along the way about some other issue, but how to really respond to encampments, to protests, to defacing, to graffiti, to all the things, was really a need for universities to remind themselves what time, place, and manner means, and to make it very clear on university campuses what the rules are, what the regulations are, what the disciplinary actions are, and to reinstate order on these college campuses. I will say, for the most part, it has been a quieter year as university administrations, security systems within universities, local police, local DAs, everybody stopped being in a panic and were thoughtful about how to respond, figured it out a little bit better. So you're not seeing what you saw during the 2023-24 school year. It's a little bit quieter on college campuses because universities stopped and reorganized themselves about this new reality that was unleashed. All that being said, there's a lot to be said about the curriculum, professors, the academic environment that has been unchecked in what should be in every university: clear, open, balanced, institutional neutrality, all the issues that would have allowed for debate, for conversation, that shifted into a place it should not have over the last decade. And again, we're behind.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a lot of work to do in these academic institutions to bring us back to a balanced conversation inside and outside the classroom, where appropriate, where
Following,
appropriate.
yeah, following on your last note, do you think Jewish students and professors who openly believe in Israel's right to exist, who don't want to hide their Jewish identity, obviously, can feel safe and welcomed, comfortable on U.S. campuses today, a year after?
I do. I do think so. Again, I speak from an insider's view at Penn. I do not think students are afraid to express their Judaism on Penn's campus. I think there are hundreds and hundreds of kids who are openly and delightedly expressing their Judaism inside Hillel and Chabad and all the places that Jews gather. Nobody's doing it secretly or in hiding. I do think they're safe. What gives you a feeling of being unsafe is having someone screaming in your ear in a protest that is unchecked, that they would love to see you, perhaps not alive. So that's on university administrations, that's on security, that's on protocol, that's on time, place, and manner, because that makes you feel unsafe even if you aren't. To hear someone screaming things to you that make you feel so unsettled and disturbed.
Going back to the congressional hearings, how did you interpret the leadership failures during the congressional hearings? I mean, inability of all three to condemn anti-Semitism outright or reject calls for genocide unless they are explicitly acted upon. That was, I think, particularly striking. What do you think led to this failure?
So I won't go too deeply into it because I don't know each one of them personally, or how they were raised, or what their sense of values were, or any of those things. I was deeply disappointed in everything about it. I think these presenters were over-lawyered, over-prepared. I don't think any of them spoke from who they were. And I don't think we were watching three anti-Semites speaking. I actually don't believe that. I do believe that none of them were thinking clearly by 5 hours in, or expressed themselves with their values and expressed them in a way that was deeply hurtful, disappointing, something none of them could recover from.
How would you respond to young Jewish protesters who argue this isn't anti-Semitism, it's political? I mean, we're not against Jews or Jewish centers in universities. We're against their support for Israel. It's a legitimate political protest against Zionism, they argue, not Judaism. And we are the proof since we are Jewish.
So it's a tough question, Tamar. If you ask me personally, I think it is extremely difficult for me to hear a Jewish student express an anti-Zionist framework. I have a personally impossible time with it. What does the Jewish tent look like? Can a Federation tent be broad enough and wide enough that there's a place for an anti-Zionist Jew? It's very hard for me. That's just a really honest, personal reaction. If you ask me from a non-Jew expressing anti-Zionism, you can't convince me it's not anti-Semitism. I have a really hard time with it. I have said this many times and I'll say it again. I am at dinner tables and family gatherings with friends who have a child brought up in a deeply Jewish home, who are day school grads, who went to Jewish summer camp and are now engaged deeply with Jewish Voices for Peace, and their parents are struggling with it. Is my advice to them to reject their child or to wrap them warmly in their family's embrace? I don't think we can do the former and only the latter. I find it sad, and I have sat with many moms who, what did I do and how did we get here? I just think we have to engage in deep dialogue, exchange facts, explain the truths that we know and understand to be, and hope that love perseveres.
Dialogue and love, both a valuable path forward. Julie, I'd love to hear your thoughts on something that's been expressed by quite a few American Jews, a deep sense of disappointment and even betrayal by segments of the liberal camp. This is a political and social space where the majority of Jews have traditionally felt most at home. Jews have been some of the most steadfast advocates for liberal values, fighting for women's rights, marching for civil rights alongside the Black community, standing with the LGBTQ community, and championing so many causes that embody tikkun olam in its broadest sense. And yet, after October 7th and the surge in anti-Semitism, some now feel that parts of the liberal camp not only fail to stand with them, but in significant ways have cast them out altogether. I'd love to hear your perspective on this feeling and how you see it.
If you are asking if there is deep disappointment from people on the left or people on the far left, for sure. Allied communities that we thought we were part of that have rejected the Jewish voice, for sure. I think, again, we have work to do. I try to see things half full, not half empty. I'm part of, for instance, a conversation with Van Jones about bringing together the Black and Jewish communities in conversation. We perhaps forgot how to do that and how to focus on that and how to make sure in good times and bad that we are allied communities and we have a rebuild to do. I am deeply disappointed by the rejection of many groups from women's spaces, from pro-choice spaces, from LGBTQ spaces. And we have work to do to rebuild those alliances that deserted us. Not everyone, not everywhere. I don't ever want to just say blanketly, but it is deeply disappointing. We felt we stood up. We're not feeling it quite as we expected. Some might even use the word heartbreaking, and we'll have to work on it. We'll have to focus on it. Van is certainly leading that conversation in the Black Jewish space, and I'm proud to be part of anything he asks me to do. And I hope there will be similar movements, as I'm sure there are in those other communities we've spoken of.
Jewish philanthropists are divided between those who have decided to withdraw donations from institutions that failed to demonstrate strong leadership, and those who have chosen to deepen their engagement in these institutions in an effort to drive change from within. And you've clearly aligned with the latter option. Did you wrestle with this decision, and why do you believe it's the better choice that can really influence and change the future?
Thank you for that question. I respect people who make decisions on both sides of this. I have lived forever on a school board, on a camp board, on a university board by the adage of the late Ann Richards, who said, if you do not have a seat at the table, you're on the menu for lunch. And I believe that. I believe if my children's high school curriculum misrepresents the Middle East and I'm not engaged on the board so that I have the opportunity to voice my dissent, no one will. I mean, that's a broad statement. Of course, there are other Jews who are deeply engaged as I am, but I think I have a voice by sitting at the table. I am deeply grateful to the chair and the interim president of the University of Pennsylvania who have given me free rein to express every viewpoint I feel, as well as many, many, many people who have continued to engage. And I feel very convinced, first of all, they have an incredible moral compass of their own. But in addition to that, I think the support of those of us who feel they are on the right path for our university has been by staying in. Many will disagree with me. I have been the recipient of thousands of hateful emails for my decision to stay engaged.
Really?
At Penn. Oh, thousands. I've chosen to still stay engaged because I'm not willing to desert a place that gave me an incredible education, where I met my husband, where my children went to school. I'm not going to desert them. I'm going to make them better.
Let's talk about Israel. The financial support for Israel since October 7th has been extraordinary. I mean, the Jewish Federation's raised more than $860 million, it is.
That's right.
And with such sustained efforts over months, burnout, I guess, is natural, and philanthropy can't cover everything. So how do you balance these needs? Are there particular areas where you now focus resources?
You know, Tamar, I wish the war was over so I could say we're now shifting into simply relief and recovery, but we're not. So we need to do both. We need to keep our eye on where the emergencies are and begin to think about, God willing, the rebuild of the North, to how to make sure that the South is rebuilt and how to reinvigorate the economy in every way that's appropriate for the Jewish Federation system to help, and to make sure, unfortunately, it's not PTSD yet. We're still in it.
Yeah.
But there is going to be mental health needs for the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, the needs are long-term. They're immediate, they're medium-term, and they're long-term. And I don't know a single philanthropist who has said, I'm done. We're not done. We just have to continue to stay abreast of what we can do, what gaps we fill while the government figures out what they're funding, to just be there so there isn't a moment of, I mean, who would know or ever imagine we'd need to support hostage families? What is that? That is just not something that we've had to do at the breadth and the depth we've had to, but we just will. We'll stay in it for as long as Israel needs it.
You know, I recently had dinner with a young philanthropic couple, deeply committed to the Jewish community and to Israel. A really amazing couple. And during our conversation, they shared that one organization recently approached them to fund equipment for soldiers. And they, of course, donated gladly, but they were wondering in our conversation, is this really still needed more than a year after? Isn't the Army providing this? Which I guess this is my next question. A year on, how do you determine where philanthropy ends and the responsibility of the state begins? And how do you ensure philanthropy complements rather than replaces the state's role? And I know that's a question that's, always part of philanthropy.
That's right. I mean, so we do this because we have people on the ground. I mean, we have a full professional staff under the leadership of Becky Caspi who guide exactly what we're doing on the ground, who tell us when we're moments away from a government grant, so our funds are not needed, when the government may take a little bit longer, so we'll be the stopgap until the government funding comes in, where we don't belong and where we shouldn't be and where we shouldn't do funding. But we very much rely on our incredible professionals, a full team on the ground.
In the wake of October 7th, have you seen a shift where philanthropists who previously didn't engage with Jewish causes, perhaps preferring more general or international efforts, are now stepping up in new ways? Is there like a parallel in philanthropy to the way Israeli tech leaders became much more socially engaged in the past 2 years here in Israel?
I think you could call any CEO or chair of any federation in the 146 across the country, and they would tell you that they have hundreds, if not thousands, of new donors who never gave to us before. I think people were awakened in their philanthropy and in their Jewish identity, and that's why we were able to raise $860 million in a very short amount of time. I mean, I can tell you, though I will not give you their names since they might not like that, but of so many people whose philanthropy has completely shifted out of the secular world and into the Jewish world. I often refer to them as born-again Jews. We're always Jewish, but in a way, completely differently now. So I think yes, we are seeing philanthropy. And again, we are going to have to get to know them. That's another responsibility we have. Who are they? And how do we engage them and keep them with us in the Jewish community? Because there are philanthropists we never met who came out of the woodwork to say, what do you need? And I'm here.
This naturally brings us to my next question. 5 years ago, you and your husband were among the first to sign the Jewish Future Pledge, inspired by Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, the Giving Pledge. The idea is to commit at least 50% of one's charitable giving to Jewish and Israeli causes. Could you share a bit about your decision to sign and why this initiative is important to you?
Of course. I'd say it's two things. First of all, it's putting into action what I'm doing already. I mean, that was not a stretch. The majority of our philanthropy goes Jewishly already, always has, always will. So it was just concretizing something we've always been doing. But more than that, it was a message to our children. I hope we'll live a very long life, but someday they'll be in a state to settle. And I want, even in my death, for our children to know what our values are.
You often speak about the importance of joy in Jewish life, creating vibrant, energetic, joyful Jewish family and community experiences. And in such a difficult time, how do we maintain joy? I mean, how do we keep Jewish identity defined by positivity rather than defensiveness, which naturally is the state in which many of us are these days?
So I'll answer that in two ways. One, Jewish summer camp. I am a product of Jewish summer camp. My 5 children are the products of Jewish summer camp. And now my grandchildren are at Jewish summer camp. I think the Jewish joy that you have in an immersive Jewish experience is just unparalleled. And the truth is, I'm never afraid to do this. In every boardroom, I speak all over the country on behalf of Jewish Federations of North America. I'm never afraid to say how many of you are the products of Jewish summer camp. And the majority of the room raises their hand. There's some secret sauce that just happens there. It's why I, previous to this role, was chair of the Foundation for Jewish Camp. I believe in it, in my soul, of what happens there. Just doing a play in Hebrew on the basketball court, shouting directions in Hebrew. I mean, it's just joy at its best. I'd say the second thing is, it is a lot of what takes place in your home. I mean, we learned this during COVID for beginners. My house was just one big celebration after another of nothing. I mean, we just made up celebrations because what else were we going to do? And that's what we've tried to do since October 7th, to make every holiday, every Shabbat dinner, a little bit of joy, because we need it and we need the relief from it. I mean, I've always thought Shabbat was the greatest Jewish invention of our tradition, just to take a breath and look around the table and be grateful and be filled with gratitude and have just a little bit of joy each week. You have to, otherwise it's just too exhausting. We all need a little bit of a break. We just need a little bit of a break from all of this.
Well, first of all, I was an Israeli scout in Tel Yehuda camp when I was ages ago, and that was an amazing Jewish experience. And I'm talking from a perspective of an Israeli. It was the best prayer I ever had. was,
So there you go.
in the teva,
There
in the
you go.
nature there, which was amazing. And the second thing about Shabbat is interesting because we moved to the US a few months ago, and we always have Kabbalat Shabbat when we were in Israel. We're not religious, but it's part of our tradition. When we came to the US, one of the first things the kids wanted us to reassure them is that we're going to have Kabbalat Shabbat in America too. I mean, Friday is going to be a special day. We're like, of course it's going to be, but it was really important for them. And that was the moment I understood how much, it is the center of the week for them as well.
That's wonderful and beautiful, and I fully endorse them.
If we're speaking about family, your family's artistic achievements are truly remarkable with your husband, Mark Platt, producing for Broadway and Hollywood, and your children thriving in the arts and entertainment industry. And I've read that among all the works your family has been part of, Wicked holds a special place in your heart because of its Jewish connection. Could you share that perspective? What is the Jewish connection to Wicked?
I'm so incredibly happy for my husband because it's just broken every record there is. And I'm just thrilled for him. He's really devoted the last 25 years to the development of the musical on stage and now the movie. It's really all about my husband. The credit for this goes completely to him. He is drawn to stories about the other, which to him are stories that are deeply Jewish. Wicked is a deeply Jewish story, even if you don't first see it in first blush. We are the other, and the green girl certainly is perceived as the other. And the wizard and so many of what he says speak to the fascism that we worry about as Jews. And I know that's why Mark was drawn to the story. I mean, in easier form, I think that's why he was drawn to the story of Legally Blonde, which is his as well. It was the blonde girl who everybody stereotyped as, a dumb blonde. And guess what? She wasn't. And he told the story of the movie Philadelphia about homophobia, and really was the first serious movie to discuss the AIDS crisis. I think Mark wants to draw light to those who are perceived with hate and with otherness, and Wicked certainly speaks to that.
We haven't seen the musical yet, but my youngest saw the trailer for the movie, and the Green Witch character mesmerized her. And she'd been waiting for it for weeks. And over Thanksgiving weekend, the five of us went to see the movie together. I'm not sure who enjoyed it better, they or us, because it was really fabulous. And in the end, I told the kids about the producer of the movie and what drew him to the story. And you should have seen their eyes light up. It was amazing to watch them suddenly connect with a deeper layer of meaning behind it all. It was really interesting to see.
That's so nice. That's so nice. And I know you spoke of my other children. My son Jonah has now really exploded with this podcast that he does called Being Jewish with Jonah Platt, interviewing such interesting people and letting them explore their Judaism in a very open and beautiful and informative way, as he also expresses incredible lessons in this time. And, I think my son Ben, in the two roles that he's known the most for, was also attracted to that conversation about the other, about a child in Dear Evan Hansen suffering from mental health issues. And in Parade, a deep story about anti-Semitism that was nearly impossible to watch because it was true, about the hanging of Leo Frank. So, we don't tell easy stories in this family, but they're really important ones.
Over the past year, we've seen notable figures from Hollywood and the entertainment world stand up for Israel or speak out against anti-Semitism, Jewish and non-Jewish. People like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mayim Bialik, Ben Stiller, and Amy Schumer, to name a few of them. But the critical mass has remained silent. There have been quite a few articles addressing this, saying many are afraid to speak out because it could hurt their careers. Did the silence surprise you? Did it disappoint you?
No to the surprise, yes to the disappointment. It's a tricky time. It's a tricky time. I don't judge anybody, or maybe I do judge a little bit, to be honest. I wish people were much more forthright. Slowly, you're seeing more and more people be a little more vocal than they were at the beginning of this. I'm not one to judge anyone's fear. I have, family members who suffer from anxiety, and I understand that there is an anxiety that comes from being out in the public domain. So I try not to judge. I am disappointed. And I hope more and more people will find their voice, as I see they have. And then there's the heroes, the non-Jewish heroes like John Andrasik and Patricia Heaton and Van Jones, who've stepped forward in ways we could never have dreamed of and are deeply appreciative of.
We've reached the final part of our conversation, the Jewish Crossroads Questionnaire. 5 quick and fun questions. Are you ready, Julie?
I'm ready.
What's your earliest Jewish memory?
Walking to Shul. We walked to Shul, really enjoying that beautiful walk every Saturday morning.
If you could meet any Jewish figure from history, who would it be and why? Ancient or modern?
Maybe Esther. I think of her as a hero of the Jewish people, and I'd love to know what inspired her to find her voice and her strength.
What is your favorite or most meaningful Jewish tradition?
Shabbat.
Shabbat.
It's my favorite thing ever.
If you could jump 100 years into the future, what would you hope to see for the Jewish people?
Peace treaties galore, a safe and secure state of Israel, and a diminishment of the volume of anti-Semitism.
What's one Jewish word? It could be Hebrew, English, Yiddish, or otherwise, that feels particularly meaningful to you right now.
Am Yisrael Chai.
Am Yisrael Chai. Julie Platt, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on our podcast. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Tamar.
That's it for this episode of Jewish Crossroads. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to write to us at jewishcrossroadspod@gmail.com. Thank you to Tomer Atzabi Bar, who edited this chapter. We'll see you next time, same place, same journey, with a new voice. See you soon.